Vladimir Putin has announced the partial mobilization of the military and the people in Russia. He's calling on 300,000 troops for his war in Ukraine and reservists. So far, Vladimir Putin is calling this a special operation. It hasn't yet been a declaration of war, but it seems like it may be going in that direction. The first thing I need to say with stories like this is we do not know what is actually going on. And you will likely never know the truth about what happened in Ukraine or, to be honest, any war. Vladimir Putin will not be releasing the truth because he wants to win. And the control of information allows him to control morale and allows him to win. The same is true for the West. NATO is dumping billions into this conflict, and Americans are on the ground fighting in Ukraine. I'm not wasting words. Here's the story from CNN Politics. 2 Americans captured by Russian-backed forces in Ukraine, freed in prisoner swap. Americans are on the ground in Ukraine fighting, period. Now, to be clear, not in an official declaratory capacity of the United States, but they're there. They are there, I guess, acting as volunteers, but I think it's silly to try and claim that with NATO funding and American-trained troops on the ground, we are not involved. We are. So, World War III? Maybe. Vladimir Putin warns he's not bluffing with nuclear threat, and I believe him. I don't believe him when he tells me what's going on in Ukraine or why he's waging this war. Nah, none of that stuff. But when he says he'd use nukes, I believe it. Joe Biden came out and basically said, back off. The U.S. has threatened, if you use nukes in Ukraine, we will attack. And that will be, my friends, I suppose, the start of a major world war. Again, it's always hard to know for sure what will happen because we don't actually know what's happening on the ground. Right now, the official reports are that Vladimir Putin's forces are being forced back, that Ukrainians have broken through their perimeter and are beginning to take serious ground. And in response, Vladimir Putin has fired incendiary bombs blanketing a city that they lost. However, we're also learning from the AP that let me just pull it up. 4 Ukrainian regions are scheduling votes this week to join Russia. Of course, Western media is saying these are sham elections. And over in Russia, they're saying, no, it's legitimate. The news changes every day. Several stories that I was reading in the past few days seem to be gone. It's crazy, isn't it? I don't know why. Maybe they were retracted. Maybe they were incorrect. Or maybe intelligence agencies said, do not report that information. Take it down now. There are a lot of stories that I read about a while back that for some reason just can't be found. Now, I could go back to my own video archives. They're still there. But my concern with this is, and why I'm not pulling these stories back up, is because if they were removed, maybe they were removed for a reason. Maybe they are incorrect. But outside of Ukraine, outside of these potential referendums, we also have Taiwan. I've been hearing from people in the super chat over at Timcast IRL that friends of theirs and family members are being deployed to the South Pacific, to the Southeast Asia area, to places like Guam. We saw that the U.S. Navy is touring around Taiwan and China's essentially backing off. But now is the perfect opportunity for China to take Taiwan. And if they do, then I suppose we do have a World War III, I guess. I can only imagine that Belarus, which is already involved, is going to escalate their involvement. India is apparently getting involved. Things could get ugly. You guys got to understand, Vladimir Putin, I think, can and will use nukes if he has to. And this may escalate into a full-blown declaration of war against Ukraine, not like we don't realize what it already is. Let's read the news, but before we get started, head over to timcast.com to become a member if you would like to support our work directly. A lot of people over at Timcast IRL have been saying they're not getting notifications anymore. I've been hearing similar things about this channel as well. My friends, you must be the notification that you want to see from YouTube. If you watch this show regularly, and YouTube is not notifying people, even when you click that little bell, take the URL, share it wherever you can so that you can be the notification. I think it's fair to say that YouTube does not want shows like mine to succeed. Within reason, they'd love it if we all just towed the line and bowed to the corporate press. So I think the shadow banning and censorship is real. I think they're rather upset often, and they silo our channels to make sure that if they ban them, well, people would be in uproar. So they silo them. So it looks like everything's fine, and maybe it's our fault we're not getting play anymore. You can resist that by simply sharing the URLs yourself, sharing the website, and becoming a member. So smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share this show wherever you can. Let's read the first story from CNBC. They report Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday announced a partial military mobilization in Russia, putting the country's people and economy on a wartime footing as Moscow's invasion of Ukraine continues. In a rare, pre-recorded televised announcement, Putin said the West wants to destroy our country and claimed the West had tried to turn Ukraine's people into cannon fodder. In comments translated by Reuters, repeating earlier claims in which he has blamed Western nations for starting a proxy war with Russia. Putin said mobilization events would begin Wednesday without providing further details, aside from saying he had ordered an increase in funding to boost Russia's weapons production, having committed and lost a large amount of weaponry during the conflict, which began in late February. A partial mobilization is a hazy concept, but it could mean that Russian businesses and citizens have to contribute more to the war effort. Russia has not yet declared war on Ukraine, despite having invaded in February, and calls its invasion a special military operation. Putin confirmed that military reservists would be called up into active service, but insisted a wider conscription of Russian men of fighting age was not taking place. Quote, I reiterate, we are talking about partial mobilization. That is, only citizens who are currently in the reserve will be subject to conscription. And above all, those who served in the armed forces have a certain military specialty and relevant experience. Conscripts will obligatorily go through additional military training based on the experience of the special military operation before departing to the units, he said, according to an AP translation. In what was immediately greeted as an escalatory address, Putin also accused the West of engaging in nuclear blackmail against Russia and warned again the country had lots of weapons to reply to what he said were Western threats, adding that he was not bluffing. And this is an important point. He's not bluffing. Look, we want to pretend, we want to engage in propaganda and say Russia's going to lose, Russia's not strong, Russia is strong. They want you to think in many stories that Russia is weak and they're losing. They're not. They may have lost territory. They may have had certain areas breached, but Russia has not yet begun to fight. And that is not praising Russia. That is a warning to all of us and the West. We have this story. I believe it may be this one. Russian military rains down terrifying barrage of incendiary shells on a Ukrainian village days after it was recaptured by Kiev's troops. You take a look at this. It's insane to watch. It's terrifying. Vladimir Putin and Russia's military, they have means that they have not yet unleashed, and they have nuclear capabilities. They are fighting with one hand tied behind their back. You know what you should think of this as? The Princess Bride. You've all seen that movie. It is the scene where you have Inigo Montoya, and he's fighting, and he says, there's something you should know. I am not left-handed, and then switches hands. That's what they're doing right now in a limited capacity, probably because they don't want to escalate. And they're trying to minimize the use of force, not because I'm trying to argue they want to minimize damage to the Ukrainian people. I don't think so, but I think because they want to avoid Western escalation as much as possible and try and win slowly. It's not working. Sooner or later, Vladimir Putin will throw his saber to his right hand, and that will be when they decide to unleash true hell on Ukraine. I do not think Putin will give up on this. And I believe, and I've talked to many others, we've talked to commentators and other people who have more experience with war. Putin could unleash a smaller yield, maybe, multi-kiloton bomb on Kiev, killing tens of thousands of people and shocking the nation, shattering Ukrainian morale. He's not yet done that. He could. Now, the U.S. is threatening if we do that, if he does that, we will retaliate on the Black Sea Fleet. And then war is just going to be skyrocketing. Hey, how about this? As I'm recording this breaking news, the Fed has raised rates by another 0.75 of a percentage point to fight inflation. This just shows outside of the war, things are getting tumultuous. Putin has alluded, CNBC continues, Putin has alluded to Russia's nuclear weaponry at various points during the conflict with Ukraine, but there are doubts over whether Moscow would actually resort to deploying such a weapon. I think they will. with analysts saying it could be tantamount to starting a third world war, when the Pope is saying it's already happening. You think Putin cares? I don't believe in mutually assured destruction. That is to say, I understand the concept, but I do not believe it will play out the way people think it will. They think that Vladimir Putin fires a nuke and then everyone fires nukes and then everyone gets wiped out. No. Some argue, if Putin were to nuke DC, we'd fire back. I don't think so. I don't believe it. Maybe. But you need to understand, Vladimir Putin would not use nukes arbitrarily on DC. That makes no sense. What he would do is use nukes in Ukraine. The U.S. that can then decide to retaliate. But Putin will say, I am not at war with you. If you strike us, you are declaring war on us. If we are at war with them and we strike them and then you come to their defense, and mind you, Ukraine is not a NATO country, then we would be declaring war on Russia. Maybe then the mutually assured destruction would be our fault. You see, this is the crazy thing. I don't think we should be involved in defending Ukraine. I have friends from there. I think the country is amazing. I think what Russia is doing is abhorrent. I have no problem with providing weapons and aid, but I do not think Americans should be on the ground. And I do not think that we should be directly involved and sending billions of dollars to the tune that we are. At a certain point, you can say, Ukraine, you're not a NATO ally. You are on your own. Instead, how many billions of dollars to fight a proxy war? That, I think, is insane. To clarify, I think there is a limited case in which we can provide aid. To the degree that we're doing it, I do not think so. And it's sad because I don't want to see Ukraine get crushed by Russia the way they are. So it's tough. It really is. China's foreign ministry called on all parties to engage in dialogue to find a way to address their security concerns. While British Foreign Office Minister Gillian Keegan told Sky News that Putin's comments should not be taken lightly. Clearly, it's something that we should take very seriously because, we are not in control. I'm not sure he's in control either, really. This is obviously an escalation. Financial markets reacted negatively to Putin's comments, with oil prices spiking more than 2% and the Russian ruble slumping around 2.6% against the dollar. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu added more detail on the partial mobilization Wednesday morning, saying it would see 300,000 additional personnel called up to serve in the military campaign in Ukraine. In an interview with Russian state television, Shoigu said the students and those who served as conscripts would not be called up, and that the majority of Russia's reserves would not be drafted. Putin's comments come as Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which began in late February, approaches the winter period, with momentum appearing to be on Ukraine's side after it launched lightning counteroffensives in the northeast and south to reclaim lost territory. Speculation mounted Tuesday that Putin could be about to announce a full or partial mobilization of the Russian economy and society, paving the way for possible conscription of Russian men of fighting age. We're getting there, baby. And when he does that, look, Russia's not as powerful as a lot of people think. Maybe they want to believe. They're powerful, though. And it's the nuclear weapons that present the true problem. They may not be able to mobilize enough ground forces to take a country, but they can certainly turn it to ash. And that's terrifying. Here's what we're seeing in response. Forbes reports panic in Russia from Putin's mobilization causes flights to sell out. Now, mind you, this may be propaganda. I don't know what to believe, and I should warn you the same. Putin's going to lie. The West is going to lie. Russian media is going to lie. American media is going to lie. But here's the reports that we have. Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement Wednesday that he's calling in military reserves to reinforce his troops in Ukraine reportedly led to a surge of Russians purchasing one-way plane tickets to leave the country, pushing economy class flight prices to more than $9,000 in some cases. Yo! Man. Russians seem unconvinced when he said it would only be the reservists, with flights to destinations that still have direct flights from Moscow, like Istanbul and Serbian capital of Belgrade, quickly selling out. Prices for a one-way economy class ticket to Istanbul skyrocketed to more than $9,100 before selling out, according to the AP, while the cheapest tickets to Dubai soared to more than $5,000. Flights from Moscow to Istanbul are fully booked through Saturday, according to Turkish Airlines website. Searches in Russia for Avia Sales, a website commonly used to buy flight tickets in the country, along with Russian passport and emigration, also soared immediately after Putin's speech, according to Google Trends. Oh yeah, baby. It's coming. And do you think Putin stops there? I think Putin would drag it all down to the abyss. Why? I don't think Putin wants to see Russia destroyed. I don't think he wants it in the abyss. But I think Putin sees this as an existential threat to Russia, a criteria by which he said they would use nukes. If the U.S. takes Ukraine and negatively impacts their ability to sell gas through Gazprom in Ukraine, they're in serious trouble. More importantly, if they lose access to Crimea, that's their only warm water port, they are doomed. They need to use Crimea to send ships through the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. They have access to the Suez Canal, and the U.S., NATO would cut them off. So Russia is going to say, you know what? So be it. If we lose this 10, 20, 30 years, we're done. So what does Russia say? We won't lose it. Because Russia turning Ukraine to ash is preferable. They would still have access to their warm water port. And that's terrifying. So here we go, baby. In this tweet from Ian Bremmer, not the biggest fan, mind you, and again, not sure I trust this stuff. Searches for how to break an arm surged in Russia today. Anything to get out of combat. I think we'd see something similar, mind you, with Americans as well. But people don't want to go to war. I suppose the fear is the reservists signed up for this stuff. But regular people are scared that, given another 6-7 months, the reservists will be the front line, and then conscription will ensue. And I think Putin will do it. Because like I said, he's outright saying, we're not going to let Russia fall. From the Daily Mail, quote, I am not going to die for Putin. Terrified Russians begin anti-mobilization protests after one-way tickets fleeing the country sold out. I don't believe it. I believe it only a little bit. Like, I think it's reasonable that people might say this, but is it en masse? I think the overwhelming majority of Russians probably support their government. I believe many people don't. The flights are probably selling out because there are people who don't support this and they do protest. But is it the majority of Russians? I'm not so sure. Here's an important story for you. World War III, my friends. 2 Americans captured by Russian-backed forces in Ukraine freed in prisoner swap. Why are they there? Why are they there? Mercenaries? Yeah, I don't buy it. You do not. You know what the U.S. is probably saying? They're saying, these aren't our guys officially. They're just citizens. They exchanged prisoners for them? Who did? America? CNN reports. The freedmen are Alexander John Robert Druk from Tuscaloosa and Andy Tai Nyok Hyun, probably pronouncing that wrong. Inyok, probably wrong. They're both from Alabama. They were captured while fighting for Ukraine in the north of Kharkiv in June. We are thrilled to announce that Alex and Andy are free. They're safely in the custody of the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia, and after medical checks and debriefing, they will return to the States. We deeply appreciate everyone's prayers and especially the close communication and support of our elected officials. The families did not know the prisoner exchange was in the works. Earlier on Wednesday, the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced the release of 10 prisoners who are Moroccan, U.S., UK, Swedish, and Croatian nationals. They were released as part of an exchange of POWs between Russia and Ukraine. American veterans who had been released as part of a prisoner swap, who negotiated it, brokered by Saudi Arabia and members of their families. So these people are fighting in Ukraine, and the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia sits back while Saudi Arabia negotiates their exchange. You think Vladimir Putin falls for this stuff? Maybe they're not active duty troops, but these are American veterans who are trained by the American military, training and aiding Ukrainians. Russia has already said this is war with NATO. From the AP, 4 Ukrainian regions schedule votes this week to join Russia. Russian-controlled regions of eastern and southern Ukraine announced plans Tuesday to start voting this week to become integral parts of Russia. The Kremlin-backed efforts to swallow up 4 regions could set the stage for Moscow to escalate the war following Ukrainian successes on the battlefield. The scheduling of referendums starting Friday in the Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk regions came after a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin said the votes are needed as Moscow is losing ground in the invasion. So here's what they do. They'll have these referendums that I believe are probably going to be bunk. They'll then say, we are not declaring war. We are just reinforcing our regions that we've annexed. It's all silly propaganda, isn't it? It's just silly. From Reuters, Russia moves to formally annex swaths of Ukraine. Here we go, baby. From the Daily Mail, the story I already showed you. The willingness of Russia to blanket cities with incendiary bombs. Now, for all we know, it's not really Russia. How do we know? False flags are real things, my friends. But I think it's probably Russia, and I think Russia will use extreme tactics. The fact that they can blanket incendiary bombs in this way, they can burn cities to the ground. You don't need nukes. It can be more controlled. From the Daily Mail, America will retaliate with a devastating strike against Russia's Black Sea Fleet or bases in Crimea if Putin follows through on the threat to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. U.S. Army former European commander warns. In a chilling address to Russia, Putin threatened the West with nuclear weapons, saying, "I'm not bluffing." Retired U.S. Army General Ben Hodges says it's unlikely Moscow will order a nuclear strike upon Ukraine. But he warns if he does, America could blast Russian military facilities in Crimea with a deadly missile strike. In the firing line could include the Sevastopol naval base and Putin's prized Black Sea fleet of warships. I think they would. Targeting Crimea is smart. Threatening that's what Russia fears. This is why they want Ukraine. Access to the Black Sea, Crimea. The U.S. knows that's what they need. So they say, you go after Ukraine, we'll wipe out the one thing in Ukraine you need. But is a threat of attacking Russia not a declaration of war? Here we go, baby. I hope you're ready. Biden says this is a war by one man. Putin's bid to extinguish Ukraine should make your blood run cold, and slams reckless nuclear threats in speech accusing Russian leader of shamelessly violating UN charter. The White House slammed Putin's nuclear threat as irresponsible rhetoric. We always have to take this kind of rhetoric seriously, John Kirby told ABC's GMA. It's irresponsible rhetoric for a nuclear power to talk that way. Putin's threat to use nuclear weapons came as war is going badly for Russia. Also comes ahead of Biden's address to the UN General Assembly. War in Ukraine is top topic for world leaders gathered in New York City. So where do we go from here, my friends? Who's right, who's wrong, who's bluffing, who's not? From Newsweek, just about a month ago, World War III has already started. We've heard it all before. Say it one more time. The following is a lightly edited transcript of the remarks made by Jason Fields during a Newsweek episode, blah, blah, blah. My worry is more whether, he says, we're actually in a war right now. It's a slow-moving war in a sense. People are being starved. Prices are going up in the U.S. continually for basic staple goods. It's directly caused by an enemy. What does it mean to be at war? If it's not someone directly attacking your economy, directly attacking the world. I mean, the actual bodies are in Ukraine, but the rest of us are suffering along with it. He ain't wrong. In Germany, they saw their inflation rate hit 45%. 45. As I showed you, due to inflation, they're raising interest rates again. Good luck selling your houses now. Inventory is going to surge. Prices are going to drop. Good luck. It ain't going to happen. Or you're going to get a garbage rate for it. I mean, that's it. It's now a buyer's market. Yeah, technically, if you can withstand these rates, it's going to put people upwards of 6 to 7%. Inflation's already through the roof. They're trying to slow the economy down, but we've got stagflation. We have a stagnant economy of a recession along with inflation. So here's his point. The U.S. is actively sending weapons to Ukraine. That means that indirectly the U.S. is actually killing Russian kids. I'm not saying there's necessarily a problem with that. What I am saying is that you have to realize what's actually going on, because we're also talking about cyber conflicts. You guys know another plant went up in flames in Oregon. They'll tell you it's a conspiracy theory to think that we're being attacked, but I think it's probable, possible. About 10 years ago, I went down to DEF CON, hacker convention in Vegas. And I also went to Black Hat. Now, DEF CON's more silly fun. Black Hat is more serious security. At Black Hat, I was shown how industrial control systems could be hacked. And they explained how water pumps and refineries could be blown up from a distance. They were explaining how some of these facilities use code from the 70s. They've never been updated. Serious. Like, seriously, just ridiculous. And one guy was like, I think he said, like, it's a single line of code in it. Watch. And then he blows up a pipe. What they did was they had a pump system, and it forced water in both in the same direction, overloading one pipe. They put an emergency valve on it, blasting water out of it. They said if they did that to like a chemical pump, it would explode and just destroy the whole thing. Are we facing that now? I wonder. I really do. He says when you actually knock someone's generators offline, or if you knock someone's centrifuges, like Israel did with Iran with U.S. help, does that mean you're at war? If someone dies because you turned off the power somewhere and they were on life support, are you at war? Yes, you are. I think that is part of the problem. And what my piece was trying to get at in some ways is a huge gray area. We don't actually know. And when I think about a world war, it's not just prices here. In some ways, the U.S. is better prepared to deal with things like that simply because we're richer than other places. That doesn't mean everybody's rich. Don't take me to be saying that, but it's not the same thing as some poor African countries where grain prices are spiking and people are already starting to go hungry. I mean, that's involving Africa. That's involving Asia, United States. It really is all around the world. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Yeah, I don't think he's wrong. I do not think this guy is wrong when he says that. I agree a lot. The Pope certainly thinks so. We're already living through a third world war. And if you don't think so, good luck. Have you purchased emergency food? I've been shouting out safeandreadymeals.com quite a bit for promo spots, this not being one of them. But I bring this up because I am mocked for it by urban liberal types. And I am desperately concerned about these urban liberal types because you might not think civil war is coming. Sure, fine, whatever. But what about World War III? I mean, food prices, inflation, interest rates, it's skyrocketing. Don't take my word for it. You do you. But when the gag I make is that I'm going to be sitting in my house and I'm going to see some dude with a handlebar mustache in a flannel shirt with jeans and the cuffs folded up, raiding my chicken coop, and I'm going to come out and be like, drop my chicken. And he's going to be like, I'm so hungry, please. And I'm going to be like, no. Start walking. And he can go cry and starve. These people want to laugh at the idea that serious conflict can occur. I don't care about them or what they do. They can laugh at whatever they want. They can find whatever they want funny. But I'm telling you, man, if you're not gearing up when the Pope says it's World War III and then says it again, this time a couple of weeks ago, look at this one. Pope Francis repeats warning of Third World War. The tempest of the COVID-19 pandemic has imposed various limitations on our daily lives and pastoral activities. Now it seems the worst is over, and thanks be to God. But unfortunately, Europe and the entire world are convulsed by a war of particular gravity. In terms of the violation of international law, the risks of nuclear escalation, and the grave economic and social consequences. It is a piecemeal third world war to which you bear witness in the places where you carry out your mission. The World War, First World War, the Great War, and World War II didn't just start per se. Things were happening. Weimar Germany, inflation, political disputes, persecution, rioting. This is all happening now. We talk about civil war in this country, but the rise of the Nazi Party precipitated World War II. People look at it as one event. It's not. Weimar Germany, the rise of the Nazis and the Communist Party, the clashes, and then ultimately the Nazis' seizure of power, the burning of the Reichstag, etc., and then invasion of Poland, the Sudetenlands and things like that. Neville Chamberlain's peace in our day as Hitler just carried on. The United States is experiencing potentially a civil war. Something like that. All of this strife, it may precipitate a major conflict. I think we're heading in that direction. We've been heading in that direction. And people think it's supposed to be overnight. Why? Because they read history books, and in the history books, they go from paragraph to paragraph. The Boston Tea Party and the Boston Massacre were 3 years apart. The Emancipation Proclamation, I believe, was in the third year of the Civil War. Plessy versus Ferguson happened several years before Abraham Lincoln actually became president, and a civil war was even starting. Several states seceded from the Union before Abraham Lincoln even became president. They seceded, and there was no civil war. It was only a few months later, mind you. The war actually started. And then more states joined the Confederacy, and You look at the history books and you think that all of these things happened very quickly. The war for independence, the revolutionary period, was 20 years from when it started, and people said, we deserve to be independent. That means 2 years at the beginning of the revolutionary period, a child was born. He was 18 years old when it ended, probably fighting for independence at 17. Isn't that crazy to think? That you were born into a world, and by the time you were speaking English, it was the revolutionary period. And then eventually you fought too. Reminds me of the movie The Patriot, one of my favorite movies of all time, where these young kids are like, I want to go fight. And he's like, no, don't do it. And his kids die. I think a lot of these urban liberal types are in for a very, very rude awakening, not because they may see combat, but because they may go without food and they don't know how to survive. So what will they do? These cities are going to break apart. We've been seeing the U.S. prepare for Pacific theater for some time. Pacific theater conflict and combat. I don't know where we go. Maybe it won't be World War III. Maybe Putin really is bluffing. Take your bet, roll the die. How much are you willing to put down? You placed your chip on the pass line. Was it worth it? You know, what I see is you've got an opportunity not to gamble. And that is keep your chip in your hand. You know you've got it. Transfer that chip to somebody for a bag of food that'll last you 25 years. Or put it on the pass line. Gamble. Maybe you'll be fine. Maybe the money in your pocket's better served for buying a PlayStation 5. And let me tell you, only when the bombs drop, when the ports are closed, when the food is gone and the river's dry, will you realize you can't eat your material possessions. And for those of us that have chickens, for those of you that have goats, for those of us who have thought about how we would live off the land and tried to homestead or at least make ourselves as self-reliant as possible, we'll be okay for the most part. Life won't be easy, but it'll be life. Maybe none of this goes that direction. Maybe it wraps up. Make your bet. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.